This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Kristen Hughes. The Spinster Book by Myrtle Reed. Chapter 1. Notes on Men. If the proper study of mankind is man, it is also the chief delight of woman. It is not surprising that men are conceited, since the thought of the entire population is centred upon them. Women are wont to consider man in general as a simple creation. It is not until the individual comes into the field of the feminine telescope, and his peculiarities are thrown into high relief, that he is seen and judged at his true value. When a girl once turns her attention from the species to the individual, her parlour becomes a sort of psychological laboratory in which she conducts various experiments, not, however, without the loss of friends, for men are impatient of the spirit of inquiry in women. How shall a girl acquire her knowledge of the phenomenon of affection, if men are not willing to be questioned upon the subject? What is more natural than to seek wisdom from the man a girl has just refused to marry? Why should she not ask if he has ever loved before, how long he has loved her, if he were not surprised when he found it out, and how he feels in her presence? Yet a sensitive spinster is repeatedly astonished at finding her love transformed into a fiend, without other provocation than this. He accuses her of being a heartless coquette, of having led him on, whatever that may mean, and he does not care to have her for his sister, or even for his friend. Occasionally a charitable man will open his heart for the benefit of the patient student, if he is of a scientific turn of mind, with a fondness for original research. He may even take a melancholy pleasure in the analysis. Thus she learns that he thought he had loved, until he cared for her, but in the light of the new passion he sees clearly that the others were mere idle flirtations. To her surprise, she also discovers that he has loved her a long time, but has never dared to speak of it before, and that his feeling, compared with others, is as wine unto water. In her presence he is uplifted, exalted, and often afraid, for very love of her. Next to a proposal, the most interesting thing in the world to a woman is this kind of analysis. If a man is clever at it, he may change a decided refusal to a timid promise to think about it. The man who hesitates may be lost, but the woman who hesitates is surely won. In the beginning the student is often perplexed by the magnitude of the task which lies before her. Later, she comes to know that men, like cats, need only to be stroked in the right direction. The problem thus becomes a question of direction, which is seldom as simple as it looks. Yet men as a class are easier to understand than women, because they are less emotional. It is emotion which complicates the personal equation with radicals and quadratics, and life which proceeds upon predestined lines soon becomes monotonous and loses its charm. The involved x in the equation continually postpones the definite result, which may often be surmised, but never achieved. Still, there is little doubt as to the proper method, for some of the radicals must necessarily appear in the result. Man's conceit is his social foundation, and when the vulnerable spot is once found in the armour of Achilles, the overthrow of the strenuous Greek is near at hand. There is nothing in the world as harmless and as utterly joyous as man's conceit. The woman who will not pander to it is ungracious indeed. Man's interest in himself is purely altruistic, and springs from an unselfish desire to please. He values physical symmetry because one's first impression of him is apt to be favourable. Manly accomplishments and evidences of good breeding are desirable for the same reason, and he likes to think his way of doing things is the best, regardless of actual effectiveness. For instance, there seems to be no good reason why a man's way of sharpening a pencil is any better than a woman's. It is difficult to see just why it is advisable to cover the thumb with powdered graphite and expose that useful member to possible amputation by a knife directed uncompromisingly toward it, when the pencil might be pointed the other way, the risk of amputation avoided, and the shavings and pulverized graphite left safely to the action of gravitation and centrifugal force. Yet the entire race of men refuse to see the true value of the feminine method, and indeed any man would rather sharpen any woman's pencil than see her do it herself. It pleases a man very much to be told that he knows the world, even though his acquaintance be limited to the flesh and the devil. A gentleman, by the way, who is much misunderstood, and whose faults are persistently exaggerated. But man's supreme conceit is in regard to his personal appearance. Let a single entry in a laboratory notebook suffice for proof. Time, evening. Man is reading a story in a current magazine to the girl he is calling upon. Man: Are you interested in this? Girl: Certainly, but I can think of other things too, can't I? Man: That depends on the other things. What are they? Girl (calmly): I was just thinking that you are an extremely handsome man, but of course you know that. Man (crimsoning to his temples): You flatter me. Resumes reading. Girl awaits developments. Man (after a little): I didn't know you thought I was good-looking. Girl (demurely): Didn't you? Man clears his throat and continues the story. Man (after a few minutes): Did you ever hear anybody else say that? Girl: Say what? Man: Why, that I was, well, good-looking, you know. Girl: Oh, yes, lots of people. Man (after reading half a page): I don't think this is so very interesting, do you? Girl: No, it isn't. It doesn't carry out the promise of its beginning. Man closes magazine and wanders aimlessly toward the mirror in the mantel. Man: Which way do you like my hair, this way or parted in the middle? Girl: I don't know. This way, I guess. I've never seen it parted in the middle. Man taking out pocket comb and rapidly parting his hair in the middle: There, which way do you like it? Girl (judicially): I don't know. It's really a very hard question to decide. Man (reminiscently): I've gone off my looks a good deal lately. I used to be a lot better looking than I am now. Girl (softly): I'm glad I didn't know you then. Man in apparent astonishment: Why? Girl: Because I might not have been heart-whole as I am now. Long silence. Man (with sudden enthusiasm): I'll tell you, though, I really do look well in evening dress. Girl: I haven't a doubt of it, even though I've never seen you wear it. Man (after brief meditation): Let's go and hear Melba next week, will you? I meant to ask you when I first came in, but we got to reading. Girl: I shall be charmed. Next day, girl gets a box of chocolates and a dozen American Beauties. In February at that. Tell a man he has a dimple, and he will say "Where?" in pleased surprise, meanwhile putting his finger straight into it. He has studied that dimple in the mirror too many times to be unmindful of its geography. Let the woman dearest to a man say tenderly, "You were so handsome tonight, dear. I was proud of you." See his face light up with noble, unselfish joy, because he has given such pleasure to others. All the married men at evening receptions have gone because they look so well in evening dress, and because so few men can wear dress clothes really well. In truth, it does require distinction and grace of bearing, if a man would not be mistaken for a waiter. Man's conceit is not love of himself, but of his fellow man. The man who is in love with himself need not fear that any woman will ever become a serious rival. Not unfrequently, when a man asks a woman to marry him, he means that he wants her to help him love himself, and if, blinded by her own feeling, she takes him for her captain, her pleasure craft becomes a pirate ship, the colours change to a black flag with a sinister sign, and her inevitable destiny is the coral reef. Palmistry does very well for a beginning if a man is inclined to be shy. It leads by gentle and almost imperceptible degrees to that most interesting of all subjects, himself, and to that tactful comment, dearest of all to the masculine heart, "You are not like other men." A man will spend an entire evening utterly oblivious to the lapse of time, when a woman subjects him to careful analysis. But sympathy rather than sarcasm must be her guide, if she wants him to come again. A man will make a comrade of the woman who stimulates him to higher achievement, but he will love the one who makes herself a mirror for his conceit. Men claim that women cannot keep a secret, but it is a common failing. A man will always tell some one person the thing which is told him in confidence. If he is married, he tells his wife. Then the exclusive bit of news is rapidly syndicated, and by gentle degrees the secret is diffused through the community. This is the most pathetic thing in matrimony, the regularity with which husbands relate the irregularities of their friends. Very little of the world's woe is caused by silence, however it may be in fiction and the drama. In return for the generous confidence regarding other people's doings, the married man is made conversant with those things which his wife deems it right and proper for him to know. And he is not unhappy, for it isn't what he doesn't know that troubles a man, but what he knows he doesn't know. The masculine nature is less capable of concealment than the feminine. Where men are frankly selfish, women are secretly so. Man's vices are few and comprehensive, women's petty and innumerable. Any man who is not in the penitentiary has at most but 3 or 4, while a woman will hide a dozen under her social mask and defy detection. Women are said to be fickle, but are they more so than men? A man's ideal is as variable as the wind. What he thinks is his ideal of woman is usually a glorified image of the last girl he happened to admire. The man who has had a decided preference for blondes all his life finally installs a brown-eyed deity at his hearthstone. If he has been fond of petite and coquettish damsels, he marries some Diana moulded on large lines and unconcerned as to mice. A man will ride, row, and swim with one girl, and marry another who is afraid of horses, turns pale at the mention of a boat, and who would look forward to an interview with his Satanic Majesty with more ease and confidence than to a dip in the summer sea. Theoretically, men admire reasonable women, with the uncommon quality which is called common sense, but it is the woman of caprice, the sweet illogical despot of 1,000 moods, who is most often and most tenderly loved. Man is by nature a discoverer. It is not beauty which holds him, but rather mystery and charm. To see the one woman through all the changing moods, to discern Portia through Carmen's witchery, is the thing above all others which captivates a man. Deep in his heart man cherishes the Dorcas ideal. The old lingering notions of womanliness are not quite dispelled, but in this, as in other things, nothing sickens a man of his pet theory like seeing it in operation. It may be a charming sight to behold a girl stirring cheese in the chafing dish, wearing an air of deep concern when it bunnies at the sides and requires still more skill. It may also be attractive to see white fingers weave wonders with fine linen and delicate silks, with pretty eagerness as to shade and stitch. But in the after years, when his divinity, redolent of the kitchen, meets him at the door, with hair dishevelled and fingers bandaged, it is subtly different from the chafing-dish days, and the crisp chops, generously blackened with charcoal, are not as good as her rarebits used to be. The memory of the silk and fine linen also fades somewhat, in the presence of darning which contains hard lumps and patches which immediately come off. It has become the fashion to speak of woman as the eager hunter, and man as the timid, reluctant prey. The comic papers may have started it, but modern society certainly lends colour to the pretty theory. It is frequently attributed to Mr. Darwin, but he is at times unjustly blamed by those who do not read his pleasing works. The complexities in man's personal equation are caused by variance of three emotions: a mutable fondness for women, according to temperament and opportunity, a more uniform feeling towards money, and the universal, devastating desire, the old, old passion for food. The first variant is but partially under the control of any particular woman, and the less she concerns herself with the second, the better it is for both. But she who stimulates and satisfies the third variant holds in her hands the golden key of happiness. No woman need envy the Sphinx her wisdom, if she has learned the uses of silence, and never asks a favour of a hungry man. A woman makes her chief mistake when she judges a man by herself, and attributes to him indirection and complexity of motive. When she wishes to attract a particular man, she goes at it indirectly. She makes friends of his sister, his cousins, his aunts, and assumes an interest in his chum. She ignores him at first, and thus arouses his curiosity. Later she condescends to smile upon him, and he is mildly pleased, because he thinks he has been working for that very smile and has finally won it. In this manner he is lured toward the net. When a girl systematically and effectively feeds a man, she is leading trumps. He insensibly associates her with his comfort, and thus she becomes his necessity. When a man seeks a woman's society, it is because he has need of her, not because he thinks she has need of him. And the parlour of the girl who realizes it is the envy of every unattached damsel on the street. If the wise one is an expert with chafing-dish, she may frequently bag desirable game, while the foolish virgins who have no alcohol in their lamps are hunting eagerly for the trail. Because she herself works indirectly, she thinks he intends a tender look at another girl for a carom shot, and frequently a far-sighted maiden can see the evidences of a consuming passion for herself in a man's devotion to someone else. Men are not sufficiently diplomatic to bother with finesse of this kind. Other things being equal, a man goes to see the girl he wants to see. It does not often occur to her that he may not want to see her, may be interested in someone else, or that he may have forgotten all about her. There is a common feminine delusion to the effect that men need encouragement, and there is no term which is more misused. A fool may need encouragement, but the man who wants a girl will go after her, regardless of obstacles. As for him, if he is fed at her house, even irregularly, he may know that she looks with favour upon his suit. The parents of both, the neighbours, and even the girl herself usually know that a man is in love before he finds it out. Sometimes he has to be told. He has approached a stage of acute and immediate peril when he recognizes what he calls a platonic friendship. Young men believe platonic friendship possible. Old men know better. But when one man learns to profit by the experience of another, we may look for mosquitoes at Christmas and holly in June. There is an exquisite danger attached to friendship of this kind, and is it not danger rather than variety which is the spice of life? Relieved of the presence of that social pacemaker, the chaperone, the disciples of Plato are wont to take long walks, and further on, they spend whole days in the country with book and wheel. A book is a mysterious bond of union, and by their taste in books do a man and woman unerringly know each other. Two people who unite in admiration of Browning are apt to admire each other, and those who habitually seek Emerson for new courage may easily find the world more kindly if they face it hand in hand. A latter-day philosopher has remarked upon the subtle sympathy produced by marked passages. The method is so easy and so unsuspected, you have only to put faint pencil marks against the tenderest passage in your favourite new poet, and lend the volume to her, and she has only to leave here and there the dropped violet of a timid, confirmatory initial, for you to know your fate. A man has never had a platonic friendship with a woman it is impossible for him to love. Cupid is the high priest at these rites of reading aloud and discussing everything under the sun. The two become so closely bound that one arrow strikes both, and often the happiest marriages are those whose love has so begun, for when the great passion dies, as it sometimes does, sympathy and mutual understanding may yield a generous measure of content. The present happy era of fiction closes a story abruptly at the altar, or else begins it immediately after the ceremony. Thence the enthralled reader is conducted through rapture, doubt, misunderstanding, indifference, complications, recrimination, and estrangement, to the logical end in cynicism and the divorce court. In the books which women write, the hero of the story shoulders the blame, and often has to bear his creator's vituperation in addition to his other troubles. When a man essays this theme in fiction, he shows clearly that it is the woman's fault. When the situation is presented outside of books, the happily married critics distribute condemnation in the same way, it being customary for each partner in a happy marriage to claim the entire credit for the mutual content. Over the afternoon teacups it has been decided with unusual and refreshing accord that it is pursuit and not possession with a man. True, but is it less true with women? When her ladyship finally acquires the sealskin coat on which she has long set her heart, does she continue to scan the advertisements? Does she still coddle him who hath all power as to sealskin coats, with tempting dishes and unusual smiles? Not unless she wants something else. Still, it is woman's tendency to make the best of what she has, and man's to reach out for what he has not. Man spends his life in the effort to realize the ideals which, like will-o'-the-wisps, hover just beyond him. Woman, on the contrary, brings into her life what grace she may, by idealizing her reals. In her secret heart, woman holds her unchanging ideal of her own possible perfection. Sometimes a man suspects this, and loves her all the more for the sweet guardian angel which is thus enthroned. Other men, less fine, consider an ideal a sort of disease, and they are usually a certain specific. But, after all, men are as women make them. Cleopatra and Helen of Troy swayed empires and rocked thrones. There is no woman who does not behold within her little hands some man's achievement, some man's future, and his belief in woman and God. She may fire him with high ambition, exalt him with noble striving, or make him a coward and a thief. She may show him the way to the gold of the world, or blind him with tinsel which he may not keep. It is she who leads him to the door of glory, and so thrills him with majestic purpose that nothing this side of heaven seems beyond his eager reach. Upon his heart she may write ecstasy or black despair. Through the long night she may ever beckon, whispering courage, and by her magic making victory of defeat. It is for her to say whether his face shall be world-scarred and weary, hiding tragedy behind its piteous lines, whether there shall be light or darkness in his soul. He cannot escape those soft, compelling fingers. She is the arbiter of his destiny, for like clay in the potter's hands, she moulds him as she will. End of Chapter 1. Notes on Men.